And then there's rejuvenation, and then there's hibernation. So hibernation, I'm not going to talk to you much about, simply to say, just like you can hide the effects of aging, you say, why fight it? We'll just let time pass by and wake up when it's right, and then we'll be able to do that. And there's actually companies which do this for you as well. So I'm just going to give you all of the stuff that's happened, and I want to remind you of what I had said about money and what people want and what's desire, right? And you heard stories about how difficult it is to raise money for orphan and rare drug diseases. I'm going to show you the contrast, right? There are these different people. Many billionaires have thrown money at this aging problem. Google launched Calico, right? Then the amount of money they invested was $1 billion, right? Alcor Life Extension Foundation started charging people $200K for treatment. You know, we find it difficult to pay $200K for CAR T therapy, but there were people willing to pay that much for that. There's a company called Unity Biotechnology which raised $116 billion. So I just gave you some numbers here from some of the companies which I just simply typed in from Google. So these are not even the largest numbers. But there's one which I will show you right at the end, which I think is interesting because its opening investment was $3 billion, right? I'd be really happy if I could get that much money for a company which is going to solve one critical disease problem at all, right? So I'm going to skip this. You already heard me complain about this, but this is something that's become a really important part of the field, right? This is Bioinformant, which is listing the 10 stem cell anti-aging products that are available on the market right now. This is the second piece, which it's really good science, but this is an example of what can happen when there's no commercial return to being able to do this, right? You can sell people a diet, but you can't sell them don't eat and pay me money for it, right? And so this is Mark Mattson. Mark Mattson was at the NIH, at the National Institute of Aging, and he was the one who pioneered the idea of alternate day fasting. And this came from a series of observations in animals, which showed that if you made them fast, you could extend their lifespan by 50%. Okay? So 50% is pretty significant, right? So it's like saying if you could do this and you could do alternate day fasting, and we are saying we normally live to 75 to 80, we have reached our target close to 120, right? And to get to 150, which I said was the upper limit in a reasonable way. So this is what's been done. And so people have then looked to see how does alternate day fasting work, and is there a way to make money on it, right? And so they noticed one other thing. The same regulation that you get with alternate day fasting is what regulates your biological clock. So it's, if we have the small molecule factors which we can use to substitute for alternate day fasting, or we could just use them to regulate the biological clock, we could achieve that so that we don't even have to fast anymore to be able to do it. And there's a whole set of companies which are working on that. So they came up with a new name for this. They're called senolytics, right? And I won't go through all of this. It just says, well, cells age. If we can repair them as they're aging, and if we can do it with small molecules rather than fasting, then we'll be able to get there. And there are several companies now sell many small molecule products, and I won't go through the list. You can guess what they are in being able to do that. And this is a serious part of regenerative medicine now, and we do screening with stem cells to look at what molecules are there to be able to do that. I want to spend a couple of minutes on mesenchymal stem cells and aging. Turns out that there was this old story, not old story, it was actually verified, which was if you use young cells in old people, then young blood in old, that would actually help you stay healthy. And this was at the time of Pope Innocent, where he was recommended that he suck the blood of babies, right? And that's why the whole vampire stories have come from, in being able to do that. MSC was an extension of that idea, that if you put young cells into old people, that will work, or if you were to put young blood into old, that would work. And there have been a whole series of experiments that have been done on that, where you can stitch two mice together so that they share blood circulation. And if you stitch a young mouse to an old mouse, then the old mouse suddenly is as frisky as a young mouse. Right? And if you do fusion experiments at the cell level, then if you take a stem cell and fuse it with an old senescent cell, then that old senescent cell becomes much more like a stem cell. Okay? So So there's some basis for that, but the idea that this will actually work is, of course, open to question, but nevertheless, this has become an important field of activity. But there's another piece of using MSC, and that was MSC can be used to treat the diseases of aging, so that you're not necessarily treating aging itself, but you're enhancing wellness, right, to be able to do that. And so there's this whole idea that you can use many different things to enhance wellness to be able to get to that next stage, but MSC have caught the eye of many of the people who do it. So that's where that's been done, and I won't go through all the mechanisms that this is being done with, but the basic idea remains the same. Young cells before old cells, use them. If you can modify them with the things that you know affect aging, then that will be great in being able to get that. Okay. There's another new cell that people have gotten quite excited about, and that's the macrophage. So it turns out that one other theory on aging, which I didn't want to tell you a whole lot about in the beginning, is that you accumulate garbage, and the cells that clear up that garbage are macrophages. And so we think that just like you live in a house for a long period of time, you accumulate enough stuff, and that stuff, gums up the works. So if you could get rejuvenated macrophages, then you would be able to treat a lot of these things. And importantly, you would be able to treat things which cause the most damaging effects during aging, like a stroke, etc., because they can clear up the cholesterol plaques that are formed in your blood vessels. That's one of the important functions to be able to do this. Okay. The other piece that's been quite exciting about doing this, where there's been a lot of effort, comes from the findings from a rare disease called progeria. So progeria is premature aging, so that you have children who look like old people and die of old age at the age of 16 to 20, or if that long. And there are a whole series of progeroid syndromes which tell you that you age because there's a problem with DNA repair. So that's what I told you before, that if you can repair your DNA, then this is a jump, right? If having bad DNA repair causes you to age prematurely, maybe if I enhance my DNA repair, then I will live longer, right? So you see it's a difference, but that's an important thing that people have jumped over, and they have been doing this on a regular basis. And the reason why they think that this is the case, and this may be important, was two pieces of data that came out of whales and from a bacterial resistance to radiation. So there is a particular bacteria which resists radiation damage, which would kill every other species. And the way it does it is by duplicating its DNA so that it can use a copy to correct all the DNA damage that's been done. And Diablo whales did a really interesting thing. They upregulated, or they have a duplication of the DNA repair machinery. So as a result, they repair their DNA much faster than humans do, and their age span is 3 times as long as what humans do. So it's the same enzyme, it's just more of that in being able to do it. And because of the way they do it, you can see it's a protective effect because they don't get cancer as well, because cancer requires DNA damage, right? Or mistakes in DNA. So this is the last 2 slides that I'm going to show you. One is rejuvenation using Yamanaka factors. So I don't know if you were here for some of the earlier talks, but embryonic stem cells are truly immortal cells. They are part of your genome. This is how, after fertilization, you get these cells. And then Dr. Yamanaka, Shinya Yamanaka, got the Nobel Prize for saying that I have figured out the factors which can switch this, right, to make that cell immortal or make it a pluripotent cell. They were called the induced pluripotent factors, right? So people, of course, jumped to that and said, well, if they can make a single cell go back to becoming a pluripotent cell, maybe I can use a subset of those factors, and I can use them in a right way, so I don't give a high enough dose to make them pluripotent cells, but I just get them to be younger, right? So if I can do that, then I would have rejuvenated the cells. And because I can rejuvenate all cells in the body, then maybe I will get you to really be truly younger. And this caught the fancy of several people, and that was work which was done by Dr. Belmonte, whose lab first described this, to show that this can be done, that simply adding these factors into adult cells, you could just get this sort of improvement. And that led to this launching of this research initiative called Altos Labs with $3 billion in initial financing. from Bacchus, with just this idea that we can look at rejuvenation. Okay? So I'll end here by just summarizing to say humans and the cells have a finite lifespan, and depending on who you talk to, it's 38 years to 150 years. It's thought that we age to make way for the next generation, and this is why sex hormones affect aging, right? Symptoms of aging can be reversed by diet, exercise, and a variety of drugs to make you age well, but they don't necessarily enhance your lifespan that we know of. MSC have become a workhorse cell type that can be used to treat the effects of aging, and this has been followed by using hematopoietic stem cells with that same idea. Although we understand how some species can be immortal, we are not sure how to put that understanding to practical use. Humans, though, we have tantalizing clues from pluripotent stem cells and cancer cells, which appear to be immortal. We don't know if that can be applied in the same way that I talked about the earlier piece. The reprogramming process discovered by Yamanaka and colleagues and built on by many others offers this tantalizing possibility of truly reversing aging in an adult and thus resetting the biological clock. Cicadas, hibernation in animals, and advances in cryopreservation may offer an alternative but lesser paths to life spanning centuries. Okay. Thank you. So, is there a question for Dr. Rao? Any questions? Anybody wants to invest in Altos Labs? Anybody wants to buy any of these products? I have to say I have no investment or anything or participation in any of these companies.
Thank you, Mahendra.
There's a question.
Question. Can you move so he can move there?
Yes, sir. So we don't know. People have done these experiments in culture, and in culture we don't see a significant change with the mechanism that whales use, but we see an increased protection against stress or when you add some damaging agent to the culture. So we don't know if it will work in humans, and nobody's willing to do that experiment right off the bat. But theoretically there should be no reason to expect it to have any fundamental change, you know. So I don't know. There's a story about there's this there's a mutation which doubles the gene which causes you to make muscle, and so you make twice as many muscle cells as you would otherwise, and that makes you big, but it doesn't change anything overall, you know, because of other compensation that occurs.
Great talk. I wish Barney would give you 1 hour and a half instead of a little time. It's a fascinating field. I was wondering if you have any thoughts about bats, because we started this project in Italy called the Batman Project at the time of COVID. Say we can learn something from bats because they're resistant from viral infection. I mean, they carry, but they're resistant. But then if you look, they also don't have autoimmune diseases, and also they live 10 times longer than mice and rats, even if they're not rodent as a species. But it's fascinating how some link could be between resistance to viral infection, resistance to autoimmunity, ability to modulate the immune system and inflammation, and longevity compared to other animals of similar size.
So there is a link, and people have talked about what's called immune senescence, and because the immune cells are the really important regulators of killing damaged cells and unhealthy cells and providing room for new healthy cells to grow. And so people have shown that if you have defects in the immune system, your lifespan changes. So I don't know the data on bats and how the immune system works, but this is often a good correlation that people see with the immune system repair, regeneration, and lifespan.
Quick question. You were talking about how epigenetic signature could be used to predict the lifespan. My question is, what would be the evolutionary significance of having those conservations, of those modifications, epigenetic modifications, that is?
So, you know, what we have learned is that there's lots we don't understand, but when we inherit genes, there are two important pieces. there is a regulation of which allele is expressed when you have 2 copies of a gene, whether you inherit it from your father or you inherit it from your mother. And if you express it from the wrong parent, you have a lot of significant changes, even though your genome is absolutely identical. And epigenetic variations or modulation are really important in how you respond to environmental stress. So it shuts down certain genes and it causes overexpression of certain genes. And so in yeast and others, it's an important regulation in looking at whether you're going to go through a budding stage or you're going to go through an asexual reproduction stage in being able to do that. So it seems like that's the way you change environmental signals to genetic signals, right, to be able to do that.
No, right. My question was why across species there is a conservation of some epigenetic signature that could be predictive of their age.
So it's not a conservation of the signature as it's a conversation of which genes they regulate. Okay, so so you can imagine the same players, right? Metabolism, so certain mitochondrial regulation genes are really critical for being able to do that. Your telomere ends are really important, so telomerase regulating genes are really important being able to do that. The RB and the oncogenic suppressant pathway, so that's where it is.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I have one more question. One more question?
I just had one comment I wanted to share because you brought up Jean-Louise Calment, the oldest woman in the world, and there's something about her attitude and something about her lifestyle that you can learn from a quote that she gave. She said, "I've only got one wrinkle and I'm sitting on it."
Thank you. On that good note, let's give another hand of applause to Mahendra Rao.